4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new edition of Virtue's Brand of Wrestling right here on the BigVitoBrand.com and also on WrestlingWithWrestling.com for Andre Corbeil. I am Virtue, and this is going to be a solo video this time around. And basically, I just want to talk about nothing, all the crazy crap that's going on across the world. I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to escape from reality, from personal stuff, from the daily grind of work. And I just want to talk about who could WWE potentially push as a next big star. There's a lot of names that go around on who could be the next Stone Cold, The Rock, John Cena. Roman Reigns really he got the push, but it was just so polarizing and poorly executed by WWE. He just never got recognized as that next John Cena. Not Roman's fault. He does a very good job still at what he's supposed to do. But can they make a new, let's just say, John Cena? I've heard names like Keith Lee from NXT get thrown around. That would be cool. But he's still in NXT right now. I think he's their North American champion. He still needs to go through maybe being the NXT champion and kind of doing another year down there. But potentially a good future possibility. Some guys I've talked about in the past, Big E, but they just will never break up the New Day. That's just Vince McMahon's baby, his creation that didn't get over originally as the babies. Then they turned the New Day heel, and then the rest is history. And Vince McMahon's going to make them the greatest, trio, tag team, Freebird Rules team of all time. And that's going to hurt Big E, who could have been potentially a good main event superstar. Now, it's a different world of main eventers these days because they do have the brand split. They have NXT, which is still the minor leagues, but you have a main player on each show instead of just that company guy. And if we had to pick the company guy in the last 5 years, it's been Roman, right, consistently, because he's been there other than him being recently out due to the coronavirus and staying safe, and of course when he was out for leukemia. But he headlined 4 consecutive Manias, but he just never got to even that Cena level because, again, it was a different culture in WWE. They just didn't want any big star to become bigger than the company. So can there be a new, I like to call it toy for Vince McMahon, a nice new shiny trophy to put up on Vince McMahon's mantle, so to speak? And I think there can be. And recently, one Matt Riddle is going to be getting basically called over to SmackDown on the main roster. Now, I've heard a lot of feedback with Matt Riddle. I know there's people that don't like him. He wrestles barefoot, the surfer, bro, high type gimmick, the real laid back. Everybody knows he was in UFC and he had a pretty good record, but he got banned because of marijuana use. WWE drug tests people, so he must have cleaned up, right? Because he's been in NXT for a couple of years now. They never pushed him really big down there, and that's kind of eye-opening to me. It almost seems like if you make a big run in NXT, you don't really get pushed too hard in the main roster. If you do, it just doesn't last long. Strowman never had a run in NXT. Now, granted, people can say he flopped, but he is the current Universal Champion. But I think Matt Riddle catches Vince McMahon's eye for a couple of reasons. Vince McMahon has dealt with egos in his company since Hulk Hogan, okay? You can probably, Jesse the Body Ventura, Superstar Billy Graham, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart. Shawn Michaels got away with murder in the locker room. People that worked backstage like Vince Russo said Shawn could swear up and down a storm to Vince and say whatever he wanted. And yet Vince continued to make Shawn one of the guys. Well, Matt Riddle is a very, very outspoken person. He's confident in his abilities. He knows that it's a game that you have to pay your dues and respect the business, but at the same time, he knows if you want to impress one Vince McMahon, he knows how to do it. Brock Lesnar does whatever he wants backstage, throws title belts at Vince McMahon when he's pissed at him. top guy. Shawn Michaels got away with murder, literally. Not quite. Swore to Vince McMahon, come and go as it pleases, was a top guy. Matt Riddle is just probably sitting there saying to himself, I'm going to call out some of these legends that I know that I'm better at that than physically right now, like Goldberg, right? Why is Goldberg coming back and winning titles and taking big money from main roster spots when he really hasn't been relevant in 20 years and he's not moving the needle? You know, people can say, well, when he came back and won the Universal title, he moved the needle a little bit. Mm-mm. So why not call out Goldberg? Who cares if you get heat backstage, right? Most of the NXT people seem to respect Matt Riddle, so he knows who not to mess with, which is his locker room peers. But when you're talking about the legends, why not call them out? Brock Lesnar. And they can say they're never going to work with him. Well, money talks, and Vince McMahon is still the boss. And I think when something like this catches Vince McMahon's ear, he looks at it like, wow, who is this guy? This asshole coming out and saying whatever he wants. And then somebody might smarten Vince up. Dude, this guy was in UFC. Well, what happened? He won like 8 fights, but he got kicked out for marijuana. Well, is he tested positive down here? Well, he's never been suspended. He could very well be that toy Vince McMahon is looking for. We know Vince is trying it with Drew McIntyre. Okay, it sucks right now because there's no crowd. We'll see how that goes. Brock's still part-time. He finally let Strowman up there. Roman's out, right? So how much heat is Roman going to have when he does come back? Is Vince going to continue to push him as one of his main guys, or is he going to step back on that now? I don't know when that's going to happen. I still expect Roman to come back and get a good push, but I think Matt Riddle will catch Vince McMahon's eye because there's a couple things here. Riddle ain't going to take any shit. He believes in his toughness. If he were to get in a fight and he got his ass kicked, I mean, UFC fighters get their ass kicked, right? Matt Riddle lost a couple of fights, but he won a lot. I think he's going to continue to call out these Lesnars, potentially Goldbergs. I don't expect Goldberg to come back anymore. I mean, he just gets blown up after a minute and a half. You just can't work that way. But there is money to be made with a Riddle and Lesnar feud. And if somebody smartens Vince McMahon up to this, he's going to recognize Riddle. He's going to push him, not just an NXT call-up that flounders like Nakamura. I think he's going to push this guy relatively strong to the very worst. Push him to WrestleMania, and feed him to Lesnar and let Lesnar beat him. But get that hype, get the internet fans excited. Maybe bring in some casuals. I don't know if you see Brock. Dude, the Cain Velasquez did not work out. He sucked at wrestling. Matt Riddle is very good in the ring. I saw him live in Brooklyn WrestleMania weekend, and he worked Velveteen Dream, who I still think is another secret weapon to Vince McMahon because of that charisma. But there's just something about Matt Riddle. I think he pisses the right people off, but he also turns people's head like a Vince McMahon who likes that kind of stuff and confidence. And since this guy can work in the ring, we will see. But Vince needs a new shiny pawn on his chessboard, or king, or whatever you want to call it. And I think Matt Riddle might very well be starting to impress Vince McMahon. Now, it does remain to be seen. You know, a year from now, he could be floundering on the main roster, and I can be eating crow. But there's just something that Vince McMahon likes to pick a guy that he sees money in, that he can, at the very least or worst, face like a Lesnar on the big stage. You know, that's what he did with Roman. And Riddle's kind of polarizing. He has a good fan base, but he has people that don't like certain things about him either. And of course, just the fact that he is outspoken and says what he wants to on social media. I believe during his run in NXT, he impressed Triple H and Shawn Michaels. I really do. And I think those guys have talked in Vince's ear and talked him up. I mean, look at Asuka. She's finally getting her push from NXT, right? Becky became the man. Charlotte. So there are people that have been consistently pushed by Vince McMahon, even if they had to kind of pay their dues like Asuka, where it didn't seem like it worked out right away, but she did win the Royal Rumble fairly early. Went to WrestleMania to face Charlotte even though she lost. That's when people thought she was buried. Well, now look at her, taking Becky's place. So with Riddle, he brings that element of UFC real fight type stuff. The guy can still do moonsaults, which caters to a lot of what the wrestling fans today like. Could his gimmick be a work in progress? The laid back, but it could also work to his advantage because he could just be so cocky, nonchalant. He very much reminds me of a mid '90s Shawn Michaels. Now I know Shawn Michaels didn't go bro, but he was, mid '90s Michaels was a partier. The Click, drank, probably did drugs, always just kind of like all about him. That's the vibe I get from Matt Riddle. And Vince McMahon, for some weird, strange reason, is drawn to people like this. Now, it makes no sense because from everything we know, Roman's kind of a laid back guy, but he is a locker room leader backstage. So Roman could still be very vocal backstage, but we don't know it from our end. So maybe that's why he got his push, because he got Vince McMahon's respect. Lesnar basically says what's on his mind at all times. Vince, big money draw to Vince. So that's why there's something about this guy I think the only person that needs their eye caught is Vince McMahon. And if Vince McMahon gets behind you, you're going to get a heavy push. And I think of Robert Roode floundered mid-roster or main roster. Samoa Joe, granted injuries. Nakamura has floundered more or less. Kevin Owens had some good runs, but ultimately just never really consistently stayed up there. The few that I mentioned earlier, it's hit or miss when it comes to NXT talents getting the call. But again, I try to look at it from their in-ring ability, what their appeal could be to a mainstream audience. He's not going to Raw, which has the low ratings right now, right? One under 2 million. He's going to SmackDown, which still low ratings, but SmackDown's hitting over 2 million, and it's on Fox. So that's interesting. People say, well, hey, if he was going to really truly work a program with Lesnar, he'd go to Raw and work with Heyman. That doesn't mean anything. These dirt sheets, Dave Meltzer, whoever reported Riddle going to the main roster, and it is SmackDown. Dude, I don't care, okay? The fact that he's going to SmackDown, it's on Fox, right? AJ Styles just went over there. He can work matches. You got The Fiend, you got Strowman, you got AJ Styles now, you got Daniel Bryan, you got Sheamus, you got Jeff Hardy, you got a lot of potential people Riddle can work over there to get into that spot and develop his persona to the masses. I just think this screams a potential Royal Rumble and WrestleMania type scenario for a guy that is skilled in real fighting. They can make a fake scripted, choreographed wrestling match look somewhat intense and real, which Brock Lesnar always looks good when you pair it up with somebody that can really, because Brock tries to make everything look real and legit too. And you almost squeeze, you squirm sometimes when you see him when Brock wrestles a Daniel Bryan or an AJ Styles or a Finn Balor. But then you just think, him versus a Matt Riddle, especially knowing that the fans think it's never going to happen because Brock said so, because Goldberg said so. And then if Vince McMahon, the promoter, hey, I'm going to pay you this much, you got to work Matt Riddle. And it happens, of course, how do you make Brock happy? Well, put him over. But I'm just saying, I can see a scenario where Matt Riddle becomes Vince McMahon's new shiny toy on his chessboard. If you disagree with me, that's fine, because it makes it more exciting for me to watch if it does come true. And I'm willing to lay it all out on the line and be wrong, because if it happens and it's right, who's on Twitter at @NoDQ_virtue going, ha, 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 I told you so. And, I got behind the Roman thing right when he was getting all that early heat, and I had a fun 4 or 5 years, and I got to watch a guy get criticized. Promos weren't the best, but he was a hard worker, and anybody he went up against, he had good matches. Yes, the Undertaker match was a little lackluster. Yes, there were a couple dead weight spots in that WrestleMania match, but overall, Roman Reigns had a great body of work in matches. Matt Riddle can become that new toy, and who knows, maybe the people will get behind him and he'll be well-liked. Maybe he'll be a heel. Maybe people will think he is a dick and he'll get that Roman heat. I don't care, but it's going to be a fun watch and a fun ride. And I'm glad he's coming over to the main roster now because this is what I want to see. I want to see who the next big star could be for WWE. Again, it is in the era of factory of wrestlers, and it's just hard to find that next bigger, like John Cena type. They just don't want that to happen. But let's say who would be the next Roman, the guy that Vince really likes. Well, right now it's supposedly Drew McIntyre. We'll see how that goes. But I'm going to give Matt Riddle a shot at Vince McMahon's new boy toy like Shawn Michaels. So we will see how it all pans out. But follow me on Twitter if you want to further this discussion and ask me any questions at NoDQ_Virtue. You can go to my Facebook page, nodq.com/virtue. But this has been Virtue's Brand of Wrestling on thebigvitobrand.com. I know Andre likes to call it Wrestling with Virtue still over on wrestlingwithwrestling.com. Thank you for listening. We will be back with Big Vito and Getting Color, of course, every week. And then I'm going to try to do these videos again weekly, at least to give you something to sink your teeth into on a topic that's relevant to the last week or so of professional wrestling. So with that said, thank you for watching. I am Virtue, and we will see you next time.